watershed protection zoning, which is a land use classification that was established back in the early 70s, actually before FEMA mapped the 100-year flood plain. We had a zoning ordinance on the books, and we have not made any major changes to that district or those district boundaries since that time. So the concept is to take the where FEMA has mapped those floodplains, and this zoning district is really solely focused on floodplain and the floodplain habitat that goes along with it. And it doesn't relate to any wetlands regulations that are also applicable under the State Wetlands Protection Act. So shrink the land use zone classification to the same boundaries as the FEMA mapped areas, and take those watershed protection, take the zone and rezone it to special conservancy, which is how we treat the Connecticut River floodplain land. So that all the floodplain areas in the city are treated equally with respect to the land uses that are allowed and the permitting that's required for those. It reduces, this also has the effect of reducing the total number of permits allowed for residential property owners who live or have homes in this area, in that the Special Conservancy District has a provision that says if you want to expand your house, you don't need a special permit from the planning board, but you still need to comply with any of the Wetlands Protection Act regulations and building code, of course, for building within floodplain areas. Currently, in the Watershed Protection District, any substantial improvement to an existing home requires you to go to the planning board for a special permit, as well as go to the Conservation Commission and, of course, follow the building code requirements for construction within a floodplain. So by rezoning it to special conservancy, you're eliminating the planning board special permit process for a homeowner. And again, it treats all the floodplain areas within the city consistently and the same. For areas where the watershed protection is on top of a commercial district, it's merely a name change to floodplain, so that it's clear what the zone is all about. We often have confusion between what we have a water supply protection district and we have a watershed protection district, and they often get conflated, and so we're hoping that by renaming it, it really is clear what the zone is all about.
So does this mean that there could be more construction in watershed areas than there is now?
Potentially, because in those areas that are yellow, that are coming out of the zone,
Right.
And I should say that the watershed protection zone was not based on going specifically site by site and looking at the conditions on the ground. It was more of an evaluation of the stream corridors and creating a buffer on either side of the stream without really looking at the conditions. So we didn't have the studies done that FEMA did for mapping those areas. So we're using FEMA as sort of the benchmark and the tool for that study and that research. We have, I will say, from 2009, there was a proposal to also take out the 500-year FEMA zones. In this proposal, we think the conservative approach is to keep the 500 in, because this was mapped in the 70s. A lot has happened since then in terms of development, in terms of storm intensities, and so we think it's prudent to keep the 500-year flood in the watershed protection zone, or what will be the special conservancy zone, because of those climatic changes that have happened and the development changes that have caused that.
Councilor Adams?
This is the same exact ordinance that failed 3 years ago?
Except for the inclusion of the 500-year.
I'd like to clarify that we're basing it on the FEMA maps because that's the most recent FEMA data that we have. And that if that map did get updated or changed, it would not change the statute that we are creating that defines that floodplain area based on actual dimensions. And that we would have to come back and do this again if any other change were to be made to those base maps.
Right. And then there are areas that FEMA never mapped, but they're along stream corridors that are subject to flash floods, water elevation that's changed over the years that are also part of the zone because they're also of concern in terms of protecting people and structures.
So when we're referring to property being taken back or limited, if it were, we're not taking property, I agree with you, but in citizens' concerns for limiting what they can do with their property, what this proposed change actually does is take away one layer of permitting.
I mean, basically, we're talking about, from the planning board standpoint, land use issues. We're not removing any regulatory, Water Protection Act, Conservation Commission requirements, so forth. This is just a clarification of there's so many supplementary zones on top of each other, it's just confusing. But all those zones go by the FEMA map, and that's, we're not introducing anything new, we're just going by what's there already and just kind of cleaning things up, again, from a land use point of view, so. Okay, can I hear a motion?
I move that we recommend to the City Council that they adopt zoning change 350-3.4 and attachment R.1 to rezone the watershed protection throughout the city.
Second, all in favor?
And an ordinance, can I get a quick motion to continue our public hearing on 353-4 until our meeting on April 8th?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And